everybody, and welcome to the second edition of Denise and Dave, or Double D. Today we have two fantastic Glasgow candidates for Alba joining us, Ailsa Gray and Michelle Ferns. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
So our first question tonight is, we usually like to ask you your favourite things that have happened on the campaign trail. So, Ailsa, do you have any fun stories from the campaign trail?
Oh my goodness me, you should have warned me about that. Do I have any fun things? Michelle, could you start? I can't think of anything fun at the moment.
Okay, traumatic things that have happened on the campaign trail. It doesn't have to be fun.
I could throw you a fish here. How about the rickshaw in Glasgow?
Oh, went AWOL. I mean, honestly, because we were chasing, that's true, chasing two bagpipers through the Glasgow Green because we're going to try and get them as part of the launch. And the rickshaw rider went off-road and through the trees. And I really did think I was going to die. I really thought I was going to die. And we hadn't had the photograph session, nothing done by that point. So yeah, I didn't actually think I was going to make the launch. So there, yeah, well remembered.
I didn't actually know that, but I was actually thinking about Michelle trying to get out of her heels. But fine, that's, as I say, nice story. I didn't know that one either.
So off-road rickshaw riding. Good. So, Michelle.
Well, I suppose the rickshaw, I better give a mention to the rickshaw because it certainly got a fair bit of attention. Mostly because people really wanted to make big points about the fact of how people were or weren't pronouncing Alba. There was lots of people had fun. What I remember about being in the square on the day, there was a real buzz. It was a real energy, and just people very much like the city, not taking ourselves too seriously, and everybody who we were physically interacting with was having fun with it. On the social media, though, on Twitter feed afterwards, it was an awful lot of really quite snobby sounding people. And I think I made a reference to it when I was speaking to Roddy on Barhead Boy, that who knew there was such outrage about people mispronouncing a Gaelic word. Now, I'm not a Gaelic speaker, funnily enough, right? This is how I speak. This is how most people at the city speak. And as I said in the article, I don't say Barcelona either, or Adidas, or, because that would be an affectation. I don't speak like that. So I just think it's funny how so much outrage was generated by what was a positive thing. And it would be refreshing if you've seen some of that outrage around poverty, around fuel poverty, about bad social housing, about really unfair wages. But it seems strange the things that people pick as a priority to be outraged about. Who knew?
I'm with you. I call it Alba. I can't do fake pronunciations because to me, I can do Scots. I can do Dundonian. Both of us can do Dundonian. Yeah. My mum's great at Dundonian. She still speaks Dundonian, but I can't do Gaelic.
I don't think that most of us would be able to speak Gaelic. I reckon we would speak Gaelic if they hadn't introduced the 1746 Act of Prescription, because I think, did they not do away with us being allowed to speak it? So I blame that. I blame that.
Yeah.
When you're talking about pronunciation,
made by Ailsa. It's another reason to seek independence. If we were an independent country, maybe we'd all be speaking Gaelic.
I can't even pronounce Gaelic. Is it Gaelic or Gaelic? I mean, that's
Gaelic.
Gaelic. Right. So that's
when you're talking about pronunciation there, the one that gets me that everybody pronounces wrong, and it's a lot easier to say it the way it's supposed to be, is the don't system. Everybody goes dehont. It's not dehont. The H is silent. It's just dom. And I don't think I've met a single person in Scotland who can actually say it right. And it just sounds like if you feel daunted, don't. That's how it's pronounced. And but it's quite crazy.
I don't think anybody, Dave, should be shamed for how they speak.
No.
See, at the end of the day, it's what you're saying. The content of what you're saying, is it making sense? Do people understand that? It's the same for jargon in politics. People overly use jargon, and it's deliberate, I think, to make the message obscure, so most people think it's something beyond their understanding, you know, beyond their involvement. Like, you're better educated, the people that know better make these decisions for you, but it's nonsense. Communication, especially good communication, is being able to communicate a broad message to a broad audience. So the question is, do people understand what you're saying? Do you understand the point that you're making? So whether you say yes or whether you say aye, or whether you say tomorrow or the morrow, do people know what you're saying? That's the main point. And everything else, I think, is a lot of it's just snobbery from my point of view.
I mean, I'm kind of the same about swearing, because there's sometimes, like, when the swear word is like really appropriate, you know, and you should be able to say it because it fits the context. It's appropriate. It's the only thing that can describe what's happened, and of course nobody's allowed to.
And it's a class thing, Denise, as well, because, you know, everybody swears.
Yeah.
The working class people swear proudly, and I'm with you. I'm really interested in language, always have been, in how it's used, and how people use it to include or exclude an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And swear words, I think, should be called power words rather than swear words, because, you know, the thing about a swear word, it's a really quick and powerful way of describing an emotional message, and people get it. So I won't swear, right? Because I don't want you have to cut a bit out. But yeah, it's a broad message. It's delivered quickly. If people say you're talking shit, if people know what you're saying, you know.
If you say, well, I don't know, he just effed off. How else can you explain about somebody just getting up and inconsiderate effing off? You know? There's only one word for it.
I'm sorry, but we're sitting talking about proud language here, and she's saying, and you're saying F off.
You can cut these bits out.
And Ailsa's sitting there going,
let's get back to the candidates.
Ailsa swears. Listen, Ailsa can do a full sentence that's just swear words. There's not even any other words in it. So I've promised her that I'm going to, at some point in the park, going to get a plaque made. But Ailsa said, Ailsa's a good swearer.
Would you like to give us a little preview?
No, but it is a full sentence with, you know, adjectives and nouns, all the rest of it, and just swearing. And it is going to go up if we get elected in. Tomorrow, Michelle has promised that we're going to get it as a wee plaque.
You could use it. You could use it at the start of your oath.
Aye.
So how are you finding being candidates? Have you had a good response? And, you know, like, how are you enjoying it? So, Ailsa.
Yeah, we're getting a very good response. It's interesting because it's below the surface. I think that's probably what I would say, is that there's lots of people that are not necessarily wanting to put up their posters, but they're absolutely willing to take a huge bundle of leaflets and go leafleting. So we had a supermajority Saturday where we took and hand delivered basically leaflets and posters to, you know, some of the super supporters. And, you know, and it was great because it was a sunny day. There was not loads of people in the garden. They weren't doing it illegally. There was no more than six. But, you know, there was people of all different voting persuasions. But it was interesting because I was meeting SNP won Alba list, but also Labour won Alba list, and I think that's what, you know, impressed me so much. So I don't know about you, Michelle. What have you found it?
Yeah, just a bit like you, Ailsa. Some very, very engaged voters that are, you know, that are not just happy to vote for Alba, but desperate to campaign for Alba. I think a lot of that's because, from my point of view, we keep hearing it sounds like it feels a lot like 2014, but you know, it does in a lot of ways. And it's not just because there's a kind of real positive vibe and an energetic vibe, whether it's the rickshaw or us all dancing or whatever. There's a real embracing of joyful campaigning again, the way it was in 2014. And that's been great. But for me, one of the most exhilarating things has just been how much I've been talking about independence. Because since 2014, it seems like we've talked about a lot of things, and we've talked about independence at some undetermined point, some part, you know, far off in the future. But most of the day job, you know, even when you're part of a group that is you know, a nationalist party. Independence hasn't been part of the conversation for so long as an immediate thing that might, you know, be delivered and how it might be delivered. And that's what I've found really interesting. I was out leafleting today and people are asking me, you know, about what currency we're going to be using. I've not been having the conversations since 2014. And that's been absolutely exhilarating, you know, having those conversations, talking about what an independent Scotland might look like. So that's been my real takeaway for the campaign. I think that the desire and engagement for independence is still there as much as it was in 2014. And it's just about putting that topic back on the agenda again.
And Ailsa, you have some ideas about the Scottish economy once we're independent, because you've worked on economics quite a bit, haven't you?
Well, that is just flipping hilarious, because I think I might have said in Barhead Boy, I dogged my higher economics exam and went up Garra Hill Park with pals instead. So I don't think I'm an expert in economics at all. However, because I was in the FTSE 100 in corporate law, corporate governance, I saw the system from the inside, is probably the best way of putting it. So I understood how the stock exchange was working, and finance, and financial regulation, and corporate regulation, and all the rest of it. So I understood that from the inside. And the thing that struck me, I was in that, doing that for 25 years, 5 to 7 years in London, listing companies in the London Stock Exchange. The only reason I had to go down was because they did away with the Scottish Stock Exchange. And the thing that kind of struck me after 25 years in that career was that at the end of it, there was less governance of big corporates than there was at the start. And that is, for me, so shocking. That, you know, that would be the case. And that, you know, the annual reports get bigger. You'd weigh them. You'd literally weigh them. But it's, you know, half of it's a whole pile of excuses as to why they're not complying with good governance. So, yeah.
Is that Gordon Brown's fault, is it?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, the 2006 Act, which that was under a Labour government, I'm pretty sure was pretty appalling parts of it. So, yeah, the Companies Act. So, yeah, I know exactly the bits that we get Scottish independence and we have our own Companies Act. I know exactly the bits that I take a pen through.
Brilliant.
I think Jim Walker's got quite a good idea about that as well.
Yeah.
The policies have been really good, because the one on like the whole not taking debt, you know, it speeds everything up. We don't need to wait, you know, and spend a lot of time negotiating, and we don't have any debt. So that's a really good one. And then getting our currency quickly is good as well.
And I think, you know, the Sustainable Growth Commission, I got involved in that both as a director of Highlands Isles Enterprise and also as a director of Business for Scotland. And, you know, it was touted as being about inclusive growth and, you know, all the stuff that Michelle talks about, what we need to do in terms of addressing poverty and addressing inequality and all the rest of it. And yet when they published it, we all looked and thought, really? You know, is that it? It was, you know, for me, it was a banker's charter. It was just the nothing of what they said they were going to do at the start did they come up with. It seemed to be a way of tying Scotland's hands behind its back after independence. It's pretty shocking in my view.
I forced myself to read that whole thing, and I tell you, it was the most wasted time I've ever spent in my whole life, just so that I could talk about it. Not because I was interested in it at all, but basically somebody asked me a question about it, I wanted to be able to answer it. The 300 odd pages, absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
I think we go on to poverty, because one of the frustrating things for me is, you know, I was like kind of socialist, and it bothers me that we have just dropped socialism completely. It's like it doesn't exist anymore, and equality is now all about pronouns. So are we actually going to, poverty is the cause of inequality. So what's your ideas of addressing poverty?
Michelle, you should do this one. You've got a great response to this.
Well, I don't know about great response. It's heartbreaking we're having to still have this conversation, to be fair, in 2020. A lot of the reasons for that on the back of what Ailsa's just talked about, that lack of governance, that lack of political will. this is what really gets me. The idea poverty is not inevitable. It's the outcome of political choices and where we put. So it's a separate conversation to say, what are our resources? How do we separate from them? And Ailsa's like absolutely right. And this is what one of the great strengths about the Alba party is, that we've got such a wealth of different skills that people bring. Everybody's got something, you know, to bring to the party, as it were. So yes, where Ailsa would be talking about the kind of big structural changes we would make in an independent Scotland, particularly having an inclusive growth that actually managed and talked about delivering any inclusive growth whatsoever, apart from the people that are already benefiting out of the system very nicely, thank you very much. I think for me, it's a lot more about political decisions, choices where we put the resources. Now, there's a lot of things that we want to do. We want to present ourselves as an outward-looking progressive country, which I think we are. I think that as Scots people, we genuinely are. But you have to be careful that you don't get in a situation of being all fur coat and no knickers, right? See how you look to the outside world, right? It doesn't really matter if your own people aren't benefiting from the policies. So I think there has to be, because you hit the nail on the head, Denise. There are lots and lots of inequalities that will be a double done for you. So as a Glasgow, you'll have a double impact. So, you know, if you're living in poverty and you're female, you're going to be even poorer. If you're from a background, BAME background, even poorer. If you're disabled, you'll be poorer, almost certainly, as will your carers be. The equality is almost always about poverty. Almost always, and I think part of the problem for lots of people in the SNP, people like me who came to the Alba party, is that we got frustrated that, and in some parts this is a failure of the left as well to organise itself, where we stopped talking about you know, solving social injustice and started talking about equality meant that you got a flat screen TV, and we started talking about what pronouns you use. These are important things, and I'm not negating how important that they are, but unless we solve things like good social housing, giving people real living wages at their jobs, you know, solving the attainment gap, making sure food and fuel poverty, unless we solve the very, very basic things, I really think that it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and sometimes, especially with identity politics, they're kind of vague and they're kind of nebulous, and you can spend 3 or 4 years having a conversation about them without ever having to really deliver anything. Where if you start talking about poverty and class, we already know the structural imbalances that cause them, and we know how to fix them. But there has to be a will, and hardly any of them, Denise, can be fixed in 5 years. Hardly any of them can be delivered over a term. And as a politician, people like things that they can say, we did this. So lots of these things are generational. They're going to take a joined up policies where you are looking at housing, at work, education, at health, as well as BAME, sex, socioeconomics. Sorry, I know this answer is a long time. I could speak all day on this. Yeah. And all I would say is we can do things differently. I think this is not inevitable. If we're going to be an independent country, which I have always wanted all of my life for us to be, we have to be a better Scotland than we are now. There's independence in and of itself is completely meaningless unless we use that power to make it a better country for all of us, and we absolutely can do that. We've got the talent, we've got the resources, and we've got the will.
And, you know, from Dundee in the independence referendum, like Whitfield, I did the Whitfield boxes, was at the count, and they were full of yes votes, you know, and the council areas. And that's the saddest thing about it, because the rest of Scotland let these areas down, and the Labour Party let these areas down really badly. And it's 7 years later now, nothing's got better for them.
Heartbreaking, Denise. I grew up in Aberlady Crescent, so I was actually born in Fintry in Grampian Gardens, and then we moved to Aberlady Crescent, and I left when I was a young teen. And you're absolutely right, it's the same. I represent a an area in the East End of Glasgow, and all the housing schemes at the referendum, they were chock-up. It's no real surprise that these are the people that are motivated for change, just as, now I'm not saying that everybody who voted no, a lot of them didn't have their own reasons, and some of those might have changed, hopefully. A lot of them will have moved to that position. But it's no surprise that a lot of people that voted no were people that were doing quite nicely at the system as it was. Thank you very much. The people who need the change were the people in Whitfield and Shettleston and Easterhouse and Douglas, and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And such a shock, because I was in Glasgow and all my family was in Dundee, and I was going between the two. So I thought we'd won. I absolutely thought we'd won.
Yeah, I'm proud of Dundee. Very proud that we got the 57%. Yeah, so hopefully on Saturday we'll have a good Alba vote. So any other things that you're like? What we normally do is like guilty secrets. So
yeah, let's go for guilty secrets.
Yeah. And they have to be good guilty secrets, because last week I have to say their secrets weren't that bad, were they?
Imagine, basically, last week we were trying to imagine Daily Record headlines like your guilty secret, and we managed to get the South candidates were one was a Jambo who liked sunshine, and at least another two were drank too much. So on you go, ladies. The floor is yours. Guilty secrets. On you go.
Well, so you're definitely first in this one.
Oh my goodness.
Guilty pleasure.
A guilty pleasure. Yeah, sorry.
It could be secret or pleasure, whatever. You want to know where the bodies are buried.
Well, I suspect Michelle might. I wasn't involved in politics before, so I know nothing. Absolutely nothing.
You're involved in finance.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Yeah. Actually, you've got a good point. Somebody involved in the Growth Commission report.
It's both ends of the same hand that hands over the brown envelope.
So do you have a guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure? Apart from wine and full family-sized Galaxy bars, not really.
Chocolate. That's
you're coming up. Everybody just comes up with like wine or gin and chocolate. They're not really guilty pleasures. However,
I'm going to give you a guilty pleasure and a guilty secret.
Right.
Although I guess that this is not going to be secret anymore. I actually shared this on our wee WhatsApp group the other day, because I had a photo taken outside the BBC yesterday with the nice Alba flag. I particularly wanted that picture because years ago when I was getting my disclosure for Westminster, which is a very, very strict disclosure, they ask you everything from what your mum and dad to your gran and granddad did, so they sent back eventually the form to say everything was fine apart from I'd forgot to add some information. And I was racking my brains and I was thinking, I definitely haven't. So I thought, God, these people are really, really thorough. So I thought what they must have been referring to is that when I was 11, I got caught stealing a multi-pack of Topics from William Lowe and taken home by the police and given a telling off. I thought maybe they mean that. So I just stuck that down. And then I remembered, no, it was I was fined under the Communications Act for not having a TV licence, because they came to my door and offered me a chance to pay for it. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not giving you one penny. And I remembered that and then disclosed it. But I did feel the need to disclose it, but with a cover note and a caveat that I didn't consider it a crime. I considered it my patriotic duty to not pay towards a state broadcaster, which is what I considered them. So that's my guilty secret, and that might even bar me. I don't know, maybe you need to cut that bit out. In terms of guilty pleasure, I'm a massive, massive Star Trek geek. Like every episode of every Star Trek series made ever, and a huge continuity freak. So if there's any part of the continuity in the story arc that's wrong, I will actually write a letter.
And is it just Captain Kirk, or do you go through all the captains?
All of the captains. My favourite was Captain Janeway from Voyager. She was a kick-ass captain. But Jean-Luc from The Next Generation is probably... I used to pretend he was my dad when I was a kid.
I think with Catherine Janeway, with them putting a woman in charge of Starship, she tried to reverse park and end up with five sectors.
You can cut that out later.
Yeah.
Ailsa,
So we've got like tomorrow. What's your plans? Are you going to be just like driving around playing the music? And honestly, we've got the music for Dundee. We got new stuff. So I think the new stuff is like it's polling day, and so we've been playing it quite a lot, very loudly. So what's your plans for tomorrow?
I'm definitely not listening to that track that I've listened to for I don't know how many hours today. And
this is Alexander. Welcome to the City of Dundee. Speaking to the Yes City of Dundee. Does it say speaking to the Yes City of Glasgow?
It does indeed. It does indeed. And how many votes did we get? Yeah, from the list? None.
Zero MSPs. Yes, it's in my head now. So we're going to be playing it. So what's your plans? Are you going around the polling stations?
Yes. I've been nipping around all the different polling stations and getting the turnout. It's an unusual election in terms of you've not got the structure of a kind of big established party behind you where you just, and you're collecting lots of data. We're basically starting from a blank page. So I'm hoping that the fact that there's a record number of people registered to vote means that because people don't really get that engaged about the status quo, is my experience in politics. If people are going to all the bother to register to vote, it's because they've got something they want to say. They've got something they want to get off their chest, and I'm hoping that what they want to say is that they want to see a supermajority in the Scottish Parliament, and they want to see movement towards independence. So I'm fingers crossed and hoping that's going to lead to a big turnout in Glasgow. And across the country, obviously, including in Dundee. I'm confident in a big turnout in Dundee, just for the fact that I've got a massive family and they're all turning out to vote Alba. So just my family alone.
Me and Lothian, we've had the numbers of the postal votes. And in 2016, there was 17% postal votes. And this time we were expecting to be massive because of COVID, and it's only 19%. Because I was worried there'd be a lot of postal votes here because we were really just kicking off, and a lot of folk would have maybe swallowed the Kool-Aid SNP 1 and 2 and just put the postal votes in, and then we wouldn't have a chance to make our case. And as our campaigns come on, it's got better. So I was a bit worried about that, but then we got the final totals through a couple of days ago, and it was 19%, so it's only up 2%. So it doesn't look like COVID's going to make that much a difference unless there's a big fall on the turnout on the day. So because the strangest thing is when you look at the houses, you look at the windows, you look at the outward signs, you're not seeing the election. But when you're talking to people, they all know about it, and it's just so utterly weird. As I say, normally. You know yourself, when you're out canvassing or delivering leaflets, you know when you're going to a good door because you can see it on the window, and you know when you're going to a bad one. You can't see that anymore, so it's all very underground.
It's been very muted, Dave, right across the whole city, even in terms of posters. Anywhere you go, areas that are normally plastered. And it's been one of the really frustrating things, but also, because I think Ailsa had mentioned this earlier on, lots of people are coming up on the quiet and saying, look, I'm not putting my poster up, and I'm not going on social media, but I'm voting SNP 1 and I'm voting Alba 2. What's been really frustrating and strange to me is when you're talking to very committed people that I know have been pro-independence campaigners for 20, 30 years. And when, it's different if somebody doesn't understand the voting system, they don't understand that they're wasting their vote. But it's when you're speaking to people that do, and you go, but 111,101 wasted pro-independence votes in this city in the last election. You surely cannot want to send 2 Tories to the Scottish Parliament from Glasgow and for Labour with your pro-independence vote. If are kind of going, oh no, tell me more, that's fine. But it's people that are going, yeah, I know. But even knowing that, I'm going to vote SNP 1 and 2 because that's what I've been told to do. That's hugely exasperating. Yeah. Because it's not about, you know, whenever all of us joined the SNP, as most of us who are now in Alba did, you know, that was the cause. The cause was independence. You know, where every party's a broad church, and none more so than the SNP, because we're not united around a common ideology. We're united around a constitutional question, and actually, in an independent country, you probably wouldn't be in the same party in terms of your ideology with a lot of people that you're in the SNP with. But the common cause was that you wanted independence. So I just can't square that circle of very much pro-independence voters saying, even though they understand that it's a more powerful lever to get in that, but even knowing that, they're going to vote SNP 1 and 2. And I think that's a problem for the SNP. If you're a pro-independence party, that they need to be honest with their voters. If they want to say just don't vote for Alba because we want the SNP to hold on, then be honest and say that. But don't say you can't have it. It's not a lever towards putting not even pressure on, but just deciding, okay, Scotland has spoken, and now we're going to go ahead and start to negotiate the terms of our independence, not ask permission for.
Yeah.
But I feel like the SNP is a little bit like Labour in the Indie ref, because they're lying to people. There's no way a list vote is going to make any difference to whether Nicola Sturgeon becomes First Minister. And that's a lie. And I don't like parties that lie, and they're lying. And it also seems to me that the unionists, Labour and the Tories, are letting the SNP do their dirty work for them, the way they let the Tories let Labour do their dirty work. You know, it's the SNP that are attacking Alba, not Labour or the Tories, you know.
I think the electorates are not daft. You know, I think they've kind of sussed it. And I think at the start of the campaign, when Alba wasn't really known about, you were seeing much more of the SNP 1 and 2. And I think gradually, as people have listened to the wider discussions and have discussions themselves, you know, within their own back gardens or wherever, that they've realised the nonsense that it is. And the message has sunk through, and the supermajority, they understand the concept. It just seems to be some of the alleged pro-independence bloggers that haven't quite got the message. And I don't understand that, because I think some of them, you know, acknowledged that they were hoodwinked in 2014, or acknowledged, you know, the astroturfing, the media blackout, the BBC bias, all the rest of it. You know, the same's happening again. The exact same tactics. And I think there are so many people that are like, I'm not going to have the wool pulled over my eyes this time. No chance. The number of people that just in the quiet, they've got the message. And you're seeing it in the blue line comments now, that so many people are like, nah, you're all right. The leader's out of touch, I think. The leader of certain other parties, I've got to keep this positive, but the leaders of certain other parties are out of touch with their electorate, with their voters.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to present the fact that we are supposed to be fellow travellers to the same destination. So some of us might have a different time scale of how we could get there. And some of us, like many of us in Alba, I feel it's urgent. I feel it's more urgent. And I feel the idea that it's a luxury that we can choose in 3 or 4 or 5 years is really for the birds. Devolution, even as it stands, even as the very, very poor substitute for independence that it is being dismantled in front of your eyes. Yeah. The idea that we can revisit this in 5 or 6 years, it's not going to happen. Now really is the time. And I just don't think we're in a position to wait. And I think that's a but because my battery is going to run out, is at 2%. If I say anything to anybody who's watching this tonight, it is the fact that this is urgent.
Yeah.
The perfect storm that is the chaos in the labour market is going to be caused by Brexit. You know, basically bits of the TTIP being implemented again on the back burner, the attacks on the Scotland Act, the internal market bill. That's even before you factor in pandemic. And the results of, you know, the labour market in Glasgow is expected to see a loss of 50,000, 60,000 jobs. This is not something we can put off. Lots of communities in Scotland were on their knees before the pandemic. They can't afford to wait.
And I think that's another important point to add on to that, to augment onto that, is the fact that, you know, Nicola Sturgeon's post-economic recovery plan is based on the Sustainable Growth Commission report, which is a neoliberal charter.
Yes.
And if we are going to address, you know, the inequality, and if we're actually going to make the economy work for the people, then we need to adopt a Scandinavian system.
Yes.
We don't need to just measure GDP. We need to measure where the citizens benefit from that GDP. That's what the Scandinavians do. It's not flipping rocket science. We need to have economic development agencies that don't just pursue economic development, they pursue social development, you know, at the same time, like Germany does. We need to have much stronger regional decision making, you know, community decision making, capacity building. And that is what's super exciting about the Alba Party manifesto, is the fact that they're taking economics and they're saying that didn't work before, it didn't work. It led to the banking crisis when the neoliberalism spun off its flipping axis because of the greed, the short-term, you know, the risk-taking and all the rest of it. It spun off its axis. You know, the IMF, the OECD, all of these, you know, huge organizations recognized it was a dud. So it's not just COVID that's a problem. It's not just Brexit is the problem. It's neoliberalism that's the problem. And that's what, you know, the Alba Party manifesto, you know, is about. It's actually about taking, you know, economics and changing it to benefit the people, to benefit the environment. You know, Patrick Harvey can't do anything that's in his manifesto without having economic policy and energy policy. Denise, you're laughing at me.
No, I'm agreeing.
I'm on a rant.
I'm just at Patrick Harvey. Can't do anything in his manifesto.
I know he can't, because you need economic policy, you need energy policy. You know, if he thinks that Boris is going to allow him to do anything that he says, he's on a hiding to nothing. So that's pretending, you know, that I'm going to save the, you know, save the climate, you know, and I'm going to save the planet. No, you really need to look at the Alba manifesto if you want proper change. Anyway, rant over.
No, I think it's good you ran. I want you ranting in the Scottish Parliament. I want to hear that. You know, from the Scottish Parliament, because that's the kind of words that we need. That your exact words and Michelle's words. That's what we need. People that are telling it like it is, the truth, and not just going along.
It's disingenuous. It's the politics of opposition, right? It's how it works. If you're not ever actually going to be responsible for delivering anything, if you promise anything, okay, so you can so the reality of the Greens manifesto, for me, is that if they were actually in government, they would have to jettison at least 95% of those policies. Okay, so and also what frustrates me about the Greens is that I think everybody can support an argument for climate justice, but as long as it's aligned to social justice, you know, there has to be an argument for who's paying the price for this and what's your plan. If you're just going to do away with thousands of jobs, what's your plan? Where are those green sustainable jobs that you're going to replace those with? You know, it's not good enough to just go, this is really quite rubbish and we would do better if we were in charge. Well, show me your policy, show me the development and the costing of it and how you're going to deliver it, and then I'll believe you.
I think Patrick's got his policy at the Hunger Games.
Well, part of being an independent country, part of being is literally like growing up, okay? It's convenient, I suppose, in a lot of ways to have a bigger brother or a bigger bully to blame, but it's quite scary. And change, even positive change, is scary. But as part of being a mature country, they say we will make the choices for tax and spend. We will make the choices for where we want to put our resources, and we will be accountable to the people that live here. Because Denise touched on it earlier on, and so did Ailsa. We hardly ever mention or measure outcomes of these policies. This is where we're really different from the Scandinavian models. You know, we lots of times administrations come in for 5 years, and all politicians are passengers. Everybody knows they're not going to, you know, you're going to be there 5 years, 10 years, and you want to make a mark, and people want to come out saying, I delivered, you know, such a, but actually, in terms of how we actually measure outcomes for where we put those resources, throwing money at something that's not working is never likely to work. You know, the best predictor of future performance is past performance. Child poverty is getting worse. The attainment gap's getting bigger. Drugs deaths are an absolute scandal in Scotland. We need new, bold innovative policies, right across a whole raft of social policies, how we look about how we want to organise ourselves. And I, for a lot of the green policies, they're easy to support. You know, who doesn't want to see a cleaner air and less traffic and a more sustainable city? Of course, we all do. But where are those jobs going to come from? And how are you going to make sure that the people that can least afford to pay the price for that climate justice are the people that can least afford it? Well, lots of people who have got the financial wherewithal to make moral judgments, you know, the kind of people that say,
Yes.
well, why don't you buy lots of fruit? You know, why are you buying the custard creams and the waffles? Why aren't you buying cherries and blueberries? Because tell you what, because see, if you're going into that Lidl with 20 quid and you've got 2 kids to feed, your fruit alone's going to cost you that 20 quid. Of course, you're going to buy nuggets and waffles because you need your kids to be full. The idea that people are making these choices, you know, the choices that are making are directed by how much money they've got in their pocket. It's as simple as that.
See, when you talk about drugs there, as I say, like, I think in 2000, Portugal took a completely radical step to the rest of the world at the time and decriminalised everything. They were the first country to actually make it a health issue rather than a criminal one. At the time when America was still going on with their war on drugs, but they basically cut their property crime thing overnight to 50% of what it was like the day before. It literally happened that quick. Property crime halved overnight when they decriminalised. And as I say, I mean, it's still illegal to sell drugs in Portugal, but now if you're caught with possession, they've got certain amount of limits that you're allowed to have of each drug, and if you're caught with it, you have to go to a sort of education thing to actually, or giving you a chance to actually go to rehab if you want. And it's all done that way, and it's absolutely slaughtered drugs crime in Portugal, and well, a lot of it's all moved to Spain now. But I mean, Portugal was one of the worst countries in the world for heroin deaths, and now it's an awful lot better than it was. I don't know what the figures are now, but like I think their heroin deaths had cut to a third of what they were previously.
It's a very complex issue, Dave, and I don't think anybody's trying to say there's any easy answers. And of course, there have been attempts, because it is reserved, you know, in terms of there have been attempts, you know, especially in Glasgow, for heroin-assisted treatment and injecting rooms that have been absolutely rejected, even though the evidence, the very clear evidence for, just as you say, I totally agree that in terms of addiction is a public health issue rather than a criminal justice issue, because it is a public health issue. And I think it's as much as to do with being sensitive and making sure that the resources are there to signpost, and so people have a route out of addiction. But it's also about understanding what are the causes of addiction in the first place. It's dealing with the root causes. Drug addiction doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, it's very unlikely that you have a well-paid job in a great house and a well-functioning family and be, you know, have addiction issues. The reality is you're going to have that whole policy around housing first, about no having a system where you have to jump through hoops to almost prove that you're worthy of support and help. And so if you get through all these hoops, then you might eventually end up with a house and stuff. The housing first policy is based on the kind of principle that you know, just what it says, we house you first. We house you with a support package, because if you've been living a chaotic lifestyle, you might need help with managing bills, you know, getting shopping, and just putting a routine into your life and putting that kind of wraparound care. Because what you know in communities, especially with particular types of addiction, and in Glasgow, part of the issue with the drugs death is it's not just heroin, and it's street drugs, and so it's this kind of cocktail of drugs. It's very, very difficult to treat overdoses for. So when people are even interacting with the medical, it's very difficult. It's much easier to treat, you know, a heroin OD or a Valium OD than this sort of a cocktail things. But it's a complex issue, but there does need to be a conversation around about it. But as I say, it doesn't just happen. It usually happens, and you know, there might have been adverse childhood experience, there might have been issues with homelessness, with insecure debt. Most people that I've encountered, this is anecdotal, but most people and agencies that I've dealt with that go into drug addiction, the first protocol is they're just trying to numb themselves to the experience of their life. They just try to, you know, and so it's about how local authorities can be supported nationally by the government to do what we can do within the rules. But the reality, like the answer to every other question you're going to ask me tonight, is that we need to be an independent country where we could be setting our drugs policy ourselves based on those issues as public health issues, as I say, rather than criminal justice issues. We're just putting the same people in jail for short-term sentences over and over again. And in these communities, especially in Glasgow and in Dundee, I was in Dundee last year before the lockdown in a particular part, and it's absolutely heartbreaking, the number of young people, you know, walking about like bloody ghosts, you know. I grew up in the 80s when Margaret Thatcher in big parts of Dundee, where there was almost, it felt to me like a whole generation of my older siblings' age, it just were lost, that generation, to drugs. And it's horrific, the idea that could be happening again in 2021.
I think that's the real problem, because when we're coming out of COVID and we've got Brexit to deal with, so we've got these two things. And my feeling is it will be like the 80s again, and we will lose another generation at least if we don't get independence. And the fact that the leader of the independence movement doesn't think independence is a priority, that is wrong. A leader of an independence movement should always think independence is a priority. They should never, ever say we can put it off. So if we need the broad shoulders of the UK to get us through this COVID crisis, then, you know, we don't need independence. She's actually undermining any case for independence by saying that. And if she, the leader of the independence movement, tells the country that we don't need it, you know, at the moment, we need to wait, then what's the country going to think? People need leaders. People need leaders. They don't need somebody going, no, we don't need independence at the moment. You're meant to be the leader of the independence movement.
Well,
we need a new leader of the independence movement.
If you're the leader of the independence movement, it's your job to make the case.
To make the case.
And
all the time.
To be confident. Yes, absolutely. And as I said earlier, I mean, if you're raising DETRA as independence, okay, and so if you're saying it's about honesty, right? And if you're saying then, like any other party, here's, we're having an election and here's our manifesto for how we're going to present good governance for the 5 years, then say that.
Yeah.
But don't say that you're an independence party, but we can't have independence, because the truth is, she may, and whoever it is you may be referring to, may be the leader of the independence movement. The truth is, the independence movement doesn't belong to any one individual, nor any one political party, and that is a fact. The independence movement belongs to the people of Scotland, and they lend, in many cases, people like myself who were members and campaigned and elected members for the Scottish National Party. Yes, you could say that for me, but there's lots of people who aren't members. There are 5 million people in Scotland, and they're not on the SNP. A lot of those people lend their votes to whichever pro-independence party seems to be aligned with their priorities. The idea that the independence movement belongs to any political party is an idea I completely reject. If you are an independence party, it's for you to prove to yourself, to the voters, that you are going to take the priorities that are theirs and, you know, carry the flag for them.
You know, like all the issues that we've been talking about just now, I feel that she probably just thinks it's too hard. It's much easier to manage devolution.
I think perhaps she does, but I think it beggars belief, because she's been in politics, you know. It may not be leader, but she was in politics when she saw the financial collapse, and she realised that, you know, London was turning a blind eye to the interest rates and Forex rigging scandals. She realised that the banks were being bailed out and that austerity was being imposed on the people to pay for it, which truly is socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor. So she has seen that. She knows the system is flawed, and therefore to not feel you know, a real, like myself and Michelle, this desperate urgency in our gut that we have to go for this. She's watching as the Scottish Parliament is being dismantled, as our chance of securing independence slips through our fingers, and is pretending as if there's nothing wrong. waiting for the end of COVID, whatever that means. It's a flipping virus. What does that mean? Or the economy starts to recover after COVID. Do you know what? It just won't. And the reason it won't is because the system that we are relying on will just make matters worse. We can't wait. We can't wait.
Ailsa's absolutely right, though, because for two things. The idea that COVID is a virus, and so this idea that there's some point in the future where all the conditions are lined up perfectly. We have a 70% favourable. I mean, are you kidding me on? And then they're slagging like the Robert the Bruce video. Could you imagine we go back to that? And somebody's like, no, Bob, get the boys back. We've just checked. We're not at 70%. Get the boys back. Of course not. Of course not. The idea is you have an idea, you build support, you present your argument in a bold and a confident way to inspire the people, because people in Scotland absolutely are fit to govern themselves. What, are we the only country in the world that needs somebody else to have a baby? No, absolutely not. I don't recognise that as the Scotland I live in. We didn't start at 45%. We started at 30% and we made the case. And I still believe to this day, if we'd had another 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks.
It had rained.
Yes, it's going to rain tomorrow as well, bugger. But yes, it's like, other people talk about gaming the system. How is that no gain in the system? We're not going to have that competition till we're guaranteed to win. It's your job to make the case for people to go out and vote. So it's my job. It's everybody in Alba's job. It's everybody in the SNP's job. It would be everybody in the Greens' job if they actually did support independence, which I'm not convinced of, but we're keeping it positive, as Ailsa said. But there's never going to be perfect conditions. So, but there's never going to be more necessary conditions than there is now.
And we have had really pretty good conditions. If you think about Cameron, he was okay-ish bad, but there was a feeling that Labour was going to come in the May, if you remember, in 2014. There was the idea that it was going to be the Labour government. And even Ruth Davidson at one of the question times said, I don't think we'll win, I think it's going to be Labour. So to fool people into thinking we're going to have Labour in the May. So there was the idea it wouldn't be a Tory government. And then also we hadn't had Brexit. So there was the whole, the EU thing. So we hadn't had Brexit. We were thinking we were going to get a Labour government. And yet, now we've had Boris Johnson, who's like incredibly unpopular, and Brexit, and lost our EU citizenship. And I've no doubt they sit by and let our parliament be dismantled, because they sat by and let our EU citizenship be taken away from us. So, how come this last 7 years we didn't have good enough conditions?
Well, how much better conditions you have if you have an explicit manifesto commitment, it says, in the event of, and the very example that you use of material change, such as, and that material change actually happens as you've just as described it, and then you make a decision that you're going to fight Brexit in England. Hang on. So, as a Democrat, there's a principle there involved, right? It's no Scotland's job to tell England whether or not they can have Brexit. That's for the English people to vote for, and the Welsh people and the Irish people, just as the Scottish people voted for it, or voted not to have it, I should have said. But we all had our vote. Whether or not you think that was the right strategy for the Scottish government to approach, there is no denying that there was a cast iron mandate for that very example, which then happened. And as far as I'm concerned, the preparations for independence should have happened then. That was the material change. So if those conditions weren't perfect, when you have the perfect example that you set out in your manifesto as the example actually happen in a way that can't be disputed, where every single local authority in Scotland voted to stay in the European Union. So what is the perfect conditions then? When is it going? If that's not perfect, what is? And you've mentioned as well about here's the reality: Labour are not getting into power in England anytime soon. Not only is the red wall crumbled, they've dug it up, and there's a trench now where that vote used to be. And on top of that, Keir Starmer absolutely does not believe in delivering independence for Scotland either. Doesn't even believe that Scotland should be allowed to ask itself the question. So does it matter if it's Boris Johnson? As unpopular as he is, he's still miles ahead in the polls of Keir Starmer. So whether it's Keir Starmer, whether it's Boris Johnson, none of them are giving Scotland permission to be independent. So do you know what? We should stop asking.
Yeah, too right. First, we had an opportunity in that Parliament with May's government that we could have passed May on the 3rd. We could have offered May our votes and passed her deal, which was much less harsh than the one we have. And we could have got our own Scotland's Place in Europe deal, the place in the single market. We give Boris an election when he blooming wanted it. Only Angus MacNeil had the sense to vote against, and we've ended up out of the EU on the hardest Brexit. So how can her strategy be good there? She's ended up getting nothing for Scotland. In fact, getting the worst possible outcome for Scotland. So why would we trust her strategy to get us independence?
Well, in terms of strategy for Westminster MPs, at the end, whether you want to be quoting Winnie and, settling up rather than settling down, the truth is for me, the truth, well, part of it's that, but the truth of it is that we're completely impotent there. Denise, when I first went there, I remember thinking, as a staffer, thinking, apart from thinking that, God, any minute now somebody's going to kick me out and go, well, some wee tinky for Whitfield's in here, somebody get her out of here. I think I thought people would be initially very hostile because it was the 56 out of 59 intake. And I thought, we're going to go down there and we're going to cut a swathe and we're going to, but reality is you've got one job down there, which is to make yourself redundant, right? You want to be redundant. And actually the longer I was there thinking, what actually are we achieving here? Because you think they're going to be hostile to you because you're a nationalist, and like most Scottish people, the closer I get to Westminster Palace, the more Scottish I get. I just can't help it. The broader my accent gets, and the more I feel that I'm kind of. They don't hate us. They're not hostile to us. They nothing us. They absolutely nothing us. We're not even on the radar. They don't even stay to hear Ian Blackford's questions most of the time. And even when we had 56 out of 59, I think what became really clear to Scotland, even if we'd had 59 out of 59, we couldn't deliver anything. Couldn't deliver nothing there. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be sending Scottish MPs down there whilst we're in this system. Yes, of course that we should. But what you shouldn't be thinking is that they can actually deliver any leverage that we had in a minority Tory government that's now a huge majority is completely it's disappeared like snow off a dike. So we can't deliver anything there, Denise.
Yeah, I mean, I would be going. I think our MPs shouldn't go. They should just turn up en masse occasionally to cause trouble. But actually mainly don't go. But just like every so often, if there's a bill they want to like disrupt and cause trouble, just turn up en masse for just something and just make a fuss, like grab the mace or, do you know what I mean? Don't obey convention, like go into the House of Lords, do bad things, just to cause trouble.
Or ignore them. I prefer your original idea, or ignore them and spend your time and your energy in working out a route to independence and planning how that will be achieved, and stop putting all your eggs in one basket, the Section 30 basket, and actually start looking at domestic law, looking at international law, looking at international diplomacy, looking at all of the tools that you would have. But that takes somebody that's great at statescraft, and that's what Alex Salmond is. But actually building a country and a nation and an alternative plan as to how we address some of the issues that we were talking about earlier, it's just not happened. And there's no excuse for that, because there are solutions. I just don't think there are enough people there that are solutions focused. I think there's far too many career politicians. I think there's far too many people that actually have become institutionalized. Yes. I think you become institutionalized quite quickly. And I think people have just got a bit comfortable. And really what you need is disruptive innovators. And that's me and Michelle.
Yeah, you definitely are. I mean, the other thing about this Section 30 is it's like Nicola gives the unionists their best lines. She gave them the Section 30 gold standard. She gave them the illegal referendum. She's giving them gaming the system. You know, why does she do that? Why does she give them the best lines? When we won, the SNP won in 2017, she basically made out that she'd lost, and everybody, I think, thinks Ruth Davidson won that election. So I don't see why she gives these lines to the unionists. I don't understand it, because the Section 30 gold standard is certainly not a single country in the entire world has ever become independent because of Section 30, because it's Section 30 of the Scotland Act.
And it was only part of a whole raft of measures that Alex Salmond took to David Cameron and George Osborne at the time. If Section 30 was the route that they went down and the agreement that they made, but if it hadn't been a Section 30, there would have been something else. There was a political will from Alex Salmond to take Scotland into an independence referendum. So I feel it's kind of like, look, in my job as convener for workforce, a kind of part and parcel of my job is negotiating with unions lots of the time, and this is how a negotiation works. As anybody knows who's ever been, people go in. So from my side, you would go in offering less than you're actually willing to give. The other side come in asking for more than they're actually willing to accept. Everybody leaves with something. Everybody leaves winning something. So for me, we got a Section 30, not because the Westminster government capitulated. We got a Section 30 because Alex Salmond said, these are the 5 ways we're going to do it. You choose your poison. And the poison was the Section 30 under the Edinburgh Agreement. No one, and even if Alex Salmond, which he didn't, agree that any future referendum would have to be granted through a Section 30 route, Scottish people aren't be held by that promise made by any individual, whether it's Alex Salmond, who I've got a great amount of respect for, or Nicola Sturgeon. The sovereignty of the Scottish people belongs to us, not any one politician. It's not in the gift of any politician, Scottish or otherwise, to hold the Scottish people over to that. It's not theirs to decide. My sovereignty is no one else's to give away.
Yeah, we can do like best and worst. So like what's pleased you most and what you've been most disappointed about, because I've had a major disappointment. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that.
Go on, tell us.
No, you first.
No, I know I'm disappointed. Listen, and I know loads of people better looking at Dundee. I could set you up. Wait till after the pandemic. I'll give you a couple of numbers.
Do they have long shiny hair and a socialist background?
Well, they've all got a socialist background.
Yeah,
after a long time, very probably. Yes.
I fell for his socialist chat. He turned out to be not the man I thought he was.
You've been out of it too long. You'd have spotted him right away 20 years ago.
Unfortunately, he turned out like barely to know what a woman is, which is not much good, for guilty secret pleasure. And and he was nasty to my friend, Wings, Stuart Campbell. It was nasty to him. So I'm like, well, if it's a choice between your friend and your man, friend's got to win every time. So yep. Bob has gone. He's been dumped. I dumped him. It's over. Me and Bob are finished. I mean, obviously I'm heartbroken about it, but plenty more fishes in the sea. So
that's like me and Brad Pitt. We're finished. I mean, I've not told him yet because obviously I've never met him. But as soon as I meat him, I'm going to tell him that's it. That's it.
I mean, like it's sort of okay. Bob didn't know about the relationship. I admit he didn't know about the relationship, but still, it's still a heartbreak. But better to have loved and lost. So that's my disappointment. Poor Bob turned out not to be like the socialist prince that, I thought he was, and he turned out to just be like a nasty person who's not nice to my friends. So he had to go. So Ailsa, I'm sure nothing heartbreaking has happened to you. Nothing as bad as that this week.
Oh, just this week.
Oh, it doesn't have to be this week, but, you know, it happened to me this week. So, you know.
Yeah, this week it's not so much me, but we have noticed in certain areas of the campaign targeting of, you know, some of the, you know, the Alba super supporters.
Okay.
So
Michelle,
disappoint. You can do good. We do disappointment first, so then we can end on a positive because we can do.
Well, okay, so we've been kind of jokey, kind of up to now in terms of disappointments, but I'm going to just be real here for a minute. I suppose the biggest disappointment on a personal level is that, yes, I understand that I left the SNP after kind of stuff, but I know still a lot of good people that are in that party that believe a lot of the same things that I believe. What's been really, really disappointing is people who you considered real close friends, I guess. You know, some people that you spent more time sometimes with these people than you did with your family, especially over the last 6-7 years when there's been maybe 1-2 campaigns a year. You know, we came straight out in a referendum into a Scottish election, a Westminster election, a couple of by-elections, a European referendum, another general election was camping out, and you just spent a lot of time with these people, and you got to, and it's been horrible seeing people who clearly still want to be your friend and that understand that you're still on the same side, you still have the same goal, which is, you know, that whole how it started, how it's going, Denise. You know, well, for me, it started for independence. That's how it's still going. But without all the cognitive dissonance that I needed to pursue it in my previous party, it's simplified to a certain extent. You know, it's all about independence for me again. So on a personal level, that's been really, really sad that people feel, not usually because they don't want to be friendly with you anymore, but they seem to be quite fearful of being overtly friendly with you. So they maybe not speak to you when they're with someone else, but maybe send you a wee WhatsApp to go, sorry, I didn't speak to you in test. That's sore. It doesn't matter who you are, that hurts. But on the plus side, like I said before, meeting so many people who are really energized and want to work, you know, want to work towards building the country that we're always talking about, you know, because talk is cheap. You know, we're energetic. I want to get to work. You know, I've got lots of ideas. Alba are probably going to be sorry they ever selected me because I'm never going to shut up when I'm in there. But yeah, people that are not going kind of just happy to take the party lines, but people who are think a wee bit outside the box. These are important, the checks and balances, keeping any political movement healthy. Because what I would say is that every single person, every individual, you have got every right to question any individual, organisation, system or movement that only tolerates you as long as you're acting, behaving and thinking exactly like they are. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for the members, and it's not healthy for the people that are leading the party either. Those checks and balances are vital. So I'm very happy that I've met or continuing friendships with a lot of people that I was friends in the SNP with who are now Alba members, and just talking about independence and feeling hopeful for the future rather than kind of despairing, which is for the last year or so, looking ahead to the future and having no option of knowing that, you know, independence wasn't coming was really difficult. So I'm glad that rediscovered hope has been the best thing that's came out of it. On a personal level, it's a shame the amount of control that any political party has over you as an individual. If you can't speak to somebody that you want to speak to, that's quite sad.
Yeah. I think that's really weird, actually, that sort of control freakery that they seem to have. You know, for example, in the code of conduct, there's nothing that prevents you for voting for or even campaigning for another party, if you remember. you know, obviously elected members are different, but for members, they can, all they have to do is not stand or be a member of an opposing party, but they can campaign even and vote. But now I hear a lot of members are getting told that if they vote Alba, they can get, you know, into trouble from the conduct committee. Oh, aye.
No, they must resign. What kind of organisation tells its members to beat it? and then asks them to vote for them. You know, some of the stuff was really disturbing before I left the party. When you had elected members, when you've seen people who'd been in the party for 30, 35 years, people of real integrity that were saying, and they hadn't just left on a whim. They went, like me, went through the 5 stages of grief before they and tried everything to reform from within. And then you look to people who are saying, you know, after 35 years, I'm heartbroken and I'm leaving. And elected members were describing these people as the trash taking itself out.
That's what they said.
Seriously, how condescending and insulting. And then, so what do you think your members exist for? 2 things: use your money and go out and leaflet for us. But listen, don't bother thinking. We'll do all the thinking. And no, I'm sorry. That's not any kind of democracy or any political organisation that any of us should want to be part of or uphold. It's not healthy for us.
Well, so good news. What from Ailsa? What's your high point?
So I'll start with the low points, that we can end with a high point. The low point probably has been the media blackout, in particular the BBC blackout. You know, coming from a regulated sector, the utility sector, have worked, you know, with Ofgem and regulators in the past, and I just think it beggars belief, Ofcom's decision in relation to this and running down the clock so that basically you know, the election will be passed before anything ultimately would happen. And I just can't believe that, well, I can believe, but you know, the mainstream media's treatment of the Alba party and the disdain, you know, for the electorate and for democracy, it's come as a bit of a shock, a bit of a blow. The positive for that is that people aren't stupid, as I said earlier, that they recognise what is going on. A lot of them do recognise what's going on. They recognise that even some of the new media are not being particularly helpful. But they're just like, you know, that'll be right. I'm not going to have the wool pulled over my eyes. And maybe a second positive point for me would be the fact that in the Alba party, and Michelle, I'm sure will back me up in this, that we've been asked to you know, help write policy for the Alba party, all of us, and we are a ragtag, disparate bunch of, you know, we couldn't be more diverse. You know, if we tried, we really couldn't be more diverse. And the beauty of that is that some of the policies that are coming out are incredibly exciting. It's the stuff that should have been done, you know, over the past, you know, 6 years or, you know, or so. This is really what should have been happening, is people looking for an alternative way to run our country, so that we can have hope, that we're not just going to be a wee tartan version on independence of what's down south, that actually we've got, you know, for goodness sake, the Scottish Enlightenment, we were the leaders of the flipping world when it came to our understanding of society and humanity. And I've just got that little bit of excitement. We can do this, and we can do it so much better. So that's the exciting bit.
I think it's like that, you know, live as if you're living, work as if you're living in the early days of a better nation. We haven't done that since 2014. We haven't done it.
And it won't come just after we're independent either. It will take work. Some of the stuff is generational, but I think I put it, and Alex said it really well yesterday. If we don't start, we'll never finish. The initial thing is that, you know, however many cliches, analogies, you know, first step of a, you know, it's just the reality. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight. Even if on the Monday we go in and start negotiating how we're going to deliver independence, that's not going to happen straight away. You know, a lot is work, a lot is very complex. And as Ailsa says, that's why the diversity of our group is a real strength, because even within the group we have very diverse views. But I think actually in the end, that's really good for the policy. There's lots of people making lots of catches. There's lots of checks and balances, Jim might see it from one point of view. I might see it from a completely different point of view. Ailsa might see it. But in amongst all these checks and balances, we're coming to a position that is working for the broadest amount of views, and also how we're organising our internal democracy is very exciting, and it has to be very much built from the members up. So it's not a top-down organisation. Policies should never be inflicted, as it were, on the group. Whether it's through branches and at conference or the policy discussions that Ailsa's talking about. If you want to be transparent, live up to that. Nobody should ever have anything to fear about being transparent. And there's nothing wrong with having a divergent view. It's not disloyalty to say, I've got a different point of view. There's absolutely nothing wrong. If your argument's strong enough, convince conference, get up there and tell them, and then you'll go by the settled will of the majority of the conference. But that's a democracy I'm willing to live by. But not 4 or 5 people in affiliate organisations, the way making decisions cut off from the membership. So I do think that internal democracy, we've made a great start, but we have to be really, really strong in making sure that we preserve that as the party starts to build its structures and the apparatus that we're going to use as we go on to be that for me, that's going to be a critical thing.
Yeah, so for me, to compensate from my disappointment with Bonnie Prince Bob, which I'm taking as bearing up as well as I can, I had some good thing happen, but it's slightly bad. So what I didn't know was there's the Courier, the Dundee Courier. Mm-hmm. Well, there's this journalist in the Courier, and he doesn't like me. I don't know why. I don't know who he is, right? But he had a go at me at the press conference yesterday. But what I didn't realise is this journalist, because somebody sent me this, had written an article for the Dundee Courier. I didn't read it, about 4 weeks ago when Alba started. And it was basically an article of Alba baddies. And it had Kenny McCaskill. Now, I don't know what he was a baddie about. I don't know. I didn't quite grasp that. It had Alex Salmond, of course, and Neil Hanley, and me. So basically, I'm on a level of a baddie level with Alex Salmond, Neil Hanley, and Kenny McCaskill. I mean, really, that makes up for Bonnie Prince. You
did good company there.
I know. And the Courier is in my home city. How proud is that? Oh.
Badge of honour. A badge of honour.
I know. I don't think many people could beat it, actually. And there might have been somebody else, and I'm going to have to find that article and find out if there was somebody else. I mean, probably I was in for gender balance. I've got to keep the pride. I mean, how he put me in, I have no idea. I mean, not on the same level here. He must have a particular grudge against me for some reason. But.
Well, you're no shrinking violet, and Dundee women are famed, and I find Glasgow women very, very, very similar, to be honest, Denise. But you'll know that Dundee women were famous for no shutting up when we're told to. We've got a real problem with that. Wonder why.
I think that guy, what's his name? He's called Malik something.
I don't know.
I don't know. He's some journalist. Let's put it this way. We shouldn't. I probably can't. Let's put it this way. He's not got the looks of Bonnie Prince George.
Bonnie Prince George. She's forgotten already.
Have you forgotten?
For somebody's forgot about him.
When it's over, it is over. I don't even remember his name now.
Is that his older brother?
Over.
Two timing.
Bonnie Prince. Anyway, this guy, this journalist, he's not as good looking as Bonnie Prince. That's all.
And he's obviously only the Courier. He's not the standard of the Tully. So I mean, he's no,
Well, if he's second to David Clegg, that's what shows you where he is in the food chain.
It's like if Denise is talking about being, damned by faint, in your case not, you were keeping good company, but talked about damned by faint praise, you know, second to Davy Clegg, come on.
I'll tell you what, honestly, if Ali ever needs anybody to filibuster in Parliament, Michelle, you go be top of the list.
Babies, what?
If you need somebody to filibuster.
I could talk night for a living. It's almost about as if I'm a politician.
I was told you could, but I tell you, it's quite something to experience. Like
But the great, really, I so want you both to get elected, and I think there's a really quite high chance that you both will. So this is going to be fantastic. I honestly can't wait to see you in Parliament. I can't. I mean, you're just like human beings, not politicians. And, you know, like, I'm so looking forward to it.
What's your feeling?
Cope with you. I honestly don't. Can you imagine? Even you, Ailsa, you seemed like sort of, but you're actually really, really, really good at arguing. It's really good. So I'm really looking forward to the two of you.
That's right. Abuse the guest, Denise. Abuse the guest. That's the way to do.
But I don't know, because Kenny McCaskill, woohoo! Humza, meet Kenny. He'll be asking questions of you from now on. Oh God, that's going to be so good. Can't wait. I'm going to tune in for it. So I'm definitely tuning in for you to do. Would you be doing economy, do you think? Who would you be questioning? Do you think? On her total failure to take the devolved payments, perhaps?
Well, funny you should mention that, because we talked about the devolved powers that we had that we didn't use. So I actually enjoyed the experience panels for, you know, our new social security system, which I fully supported the idea of putting dignity and respect at the heart of. And a big part of the reason that I joined the experience panels was to get rid of the disgusting ritual humiliations that capability for work assessments are. And it's absolutely outrageous that we've handed the powers for personal independence payment after having 2 years. We're talking about a Scottish care, you know, a national care service, but we've just handed the powers for back. So you were talking earlier on about, you know, our own leaders undermining the case for independence. What does that say? What message is that to send? We can't manage.
Exactly.
We'll hand that. That is disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful.
So you'll be on Shirley Ann's case?
I can argue with anybody about anything, Denise. So just pump me up and point me in a direction.
Brilliant. I can't wait, because this is what I want. Like, Heather was speaking to me when we were leafleting yesterday about, you know, being an MSP. And I'm like, well, what I expect every day you to be tearing into them, you know, causing trouble, exposing things, you know, like what they're doing and their incompetence. That's what I'm looking for. And every day making the case for independence, why we need to be independent. Why aren't they defined in our parliament? Why have they let our EU citizenship go? You know, that's what I'm looking forward to. And you two will be great.
We won't hold back. We're kidding.
No, it's going to be fantastic. And the thing is, you'll be allowed to. Because, like, the great thing is, the mainstream media hate you, hate us all, right? So you don't have to curry favor with them, because they're not going to like you anyway. So you can tear into everybody.
It's exactly how they used to treat the SNP, right? So most of the people in Alba, the old guard, this is exactly what they did to the SNP, where they mocked you and ridiculed you. The idea that you would be giving your vote, you know, the idea that Scotland at any point would ever be talking about actually being independent. So Alba reminds me a lot of what it used to be. And that's that whole thing where they mock you and ridicule you because they fear you. Yeah. Because if they didn't scare you, they would just, if they were scared you, they would just ignore you. They wouldn't be talking about us at all. So yeah.
It's amazing what £3 million can buy you.
Michelle, because she's called Alan here for some reason.
This is an inherited iPad.
Oh, catch Dodgers.
It's actually my ex-husband's, and I really need to change the name on it. I keep asking the Waynes to do it, and they keep saying they've done it, but clearly not.
Don't trust them. God knows what they'll change it to.
I've been shut up for so long.
Yeah.
I think there's loads of people, and there's so much that just wants to come, and I'm sure that will calm down. I'm sure after,
Oh,
I'm
please
used
don't.
to
You're fantastic. And you don't.
No,
but I'm not going to
don't
apologize.
change, honestly.
Yeah. But I do have to learn to drill it. I'm used to making speeches in the council where I get to speak for 3 minutes, and I get to make all my points. But definitely is coming from somewhere of feeling shut down and not able to say it now that it just all wants to come out. All the frustration, all the hope for the future. I've got a lot to say. I'm not apologising for it.
So we'll get some little sound bites out soon. Don't you worry.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And good luck. And I'm sure that you'll both get elected. And like with Cynthia in the because what you're saying about the economics, I'm not an expert, and Cynthia was saying things about small businesses, so I can kind of see how and similarly with poverty and like small businesses, helping to alleviate poverty as well. So I can kind of see how when you're working together, you'll just make like fantastic policies, but we need independence for it. So
absolutely, yeah. All of it. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
As I say, it's been very good to give us so much of your time the night before D-Day. And as I say, I'll try and get this ended the night and get out as early as possible tomorrow. And if anybody is watching this, you've got till 10 o'clock tonight to vote. These are your top 2 candidates for Glasgow, and well, if you see who else is on the list in Glasgow, if you got to choose between these 2, are like Mad Alistair McConaughey for whatever it is party that he's standing for, it's no competition. I'm not going to talk about any other parties because we're trying to be good. Thanks very much for coming along, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck. And see you as MSPs in the Scottish Parliament very soon.